BBOR Black Box Online Radio, coming to you from West Virginia at heart and from around the globe. And hello, everybody. Welcome to this special weekend episode of Black Box Online Radio. During the weekly lineup, I was telling you guys that I was going to do a weekend episode about Airlock 6 by Barbara Evans, which is a sci-fi novel. And this is some new territory for this channel. Black Box Online Radio mostly focuses on true crime and unsolved mysteries, as well as different aspects of psychology. And I wanted to do this episode because Barbara Evans is the host of the YouTube channel Oak Leaves and Onions, and it's a YouTube channel that I've followed for a number of years now. It's one that I've discussed a lot here on Black Box Online Radio. I've cited a lot of her comments in previous episodes of this program. So I was looking forward to reading a novel that had been written by her, and I think that it's a very interesting experience when you've closely followed somebody's content online where they're telling stories from their life, and maybe you can see how it could be incorporated into their work of fiction. But yes, Airlock 6 is a sci-fi novel, and during the preview segment that Barbara Evans did on her channel, Oak Leaves and Onions, she was talking about how she wanted it to be a hard sci-fi as opposed to a soft sci-fi, where soft sci-fi would be something that would be more like Star Wars with the lightsabers, and a hard sci-fi would be something that would be more intense and darker, but it actually ended up somewhere in the middle. And I think those are really interesting observations, because she said something else on her YouTube channel, and that was that a novel is like a soup. You want it to have flavor, but you don't want it to be overpowered by one single spice. And I completely agree with that, and I really do think that people who talk in similes are very good at conveying the message and getting to the point, because they are very good illustrations of concepts. But there's one piece of counterbalance that I'll give you, if you will. I was talking to somebody once about a novel that he was writing. This was someone whom I knew personally, and he came to me and he said, "I'm writing this fantasy novel, but I have a problem with it." And I said, "Well, what's the problem?" And he said, "I think it's too dark." And I was like, "Well, dark like emo or dark like morbid?" And he said, "Dark like morbid." And I was like, "Oh, no, 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 no. There is no such thing." I mean, one thing that I do like about fiction is you can push certain explorations to the limit. You can take human senses and human experiences, and you can go to the limit of capabilities, and then you can even go beyond them. Now, if it were dark like emo, I don't think that would be a very good choice, because that would be just people wallowing in their own emotions. That might be something that would be a little bit harder for people to digest. But if something is going to be just challenging the entirety of, well, humanity itself, I'm like, bring it on. And yes, if you're going to read something like Airlock 6, it's not going to be that intense. It's somewhere in the middle. But it tells the story of a woman named Livia, who is a custodian or janitorial worker, and she's on this type of spaceship or space station, and she gets the assignment to clean Airlock 6, but some misfortunes happen, and she is locked out of it, and then she contracts an alien parasite. And this is partnered with another health condition that she had called Hadrian's disease. And as I said, I followed the Oak Leaves and Onions channel for quite some time now, and I was just thinking about the different stories that I've heard over on Barbara Evans's YouTube channel, and how she may have incorporated them into her book, talking about a female character who likes to work in solitary environments. That reminded me of one episode that she did when she said that she had this job actually where she just had to unload trucks by herself, and it was actually something that was very rewarding, because it just allowed her to focus, and the physical activity actually felt very good for her. And I was wondering if that had been incorporated somewhat into the novel. And then she talks about how this character contracts the parasite, and then the parasite firstly prevents Livia, the protagonist, from drinking alcohol. And I was reminded of another story that was on Oak Leaves and Onions about how Barbara Evans does not drink alcohol, but at a bar somebody slipped her a baby shot of tequila, and even that made her drunk. And I just was wondering if that was another inspiration. And then I guess the final thing that really stands out immediately to me is that she was talking about having these multiple health problems at once, and I even talked to my father about the Oak Leaves and Onions channel, just saying, oh, hey, I found this video series where a woman was talking about how she got pregnant and she got sick, and she actually had to have a medically induced abortion, or an abortion that was done because of the jeopardy to a woman's health, and then shortly after that, her husband had a brain tumor. And those are the foundational principles of Oak Leaves and Onions. It wasn't started purely as a psychology channel. It was talking more about those types of subjects if you go back to her earliest episodes. I also thought there was a really interesting detail that was in Airlock 6, and this is just one sentence as I was reading through, because you have this sci-fi landscape, you have this fictional world called Erebus, but then you also have earthly creatures and earthly humans that are in the story. Livia is a human, and there's another person in the story named Enrique, and he's just sitting in the back playing Sudoku, and he's on his I guess with his pen and so on. And that just stood out to me as like a really interesting thing to include. And those types of details that you're reading in a sci-fi novel or a fantasy novel can be very interesting. The things that get carried on from real life into fiction, because, well, if you have earthly humans in the novel, why wouldn't somebody be interested in Sudoku? I mean, seriously, why not? So I think that there is something remarkable about how people try to create these types of fictitious mindscapes, if you will, that are a blend of real things from Earth and a blend of fictitious things that are purely created from the imagination. The other things that I've talked about on this channel from Oak Leaves and Onions in the past are mostly related to psychology and similar subjects. And in her most popular video, I mean, I think it's one that I've referenced a lot on this channel because it talked about how she met a guy in a bar and she said he seemed like a psychopathic serial killer, but she liked him. And I'm even there in the comments section. I'm probably one of the top comments saying that, what? You thought the guy was a psychopathic serial killer, but you liked him? And she responded to me by saying, think of it like a fascination with a large predatory cat. And a couple of years later, I ended up reading The Sociopath Next Door by Dr. Martha Stout. And that paragraph is more or less almost directly in The Sociopath Next Door. I don't know if she has read that book, but I would expect that she has, because it says there are reasons why people, particularly women, are attracted to psychopaths or people with dark triad traits. And it's just like a fascination with large predatory cats. And Dr. Martha Stout would expand upon that by saying that men might be attracted to physical appearances, whereas women are more often than not attracted to a combination of physical appearances, confidence, and strength. People who have dark triad traits, dark triad meaning psychopathy, Machiavellianism, and narcissism, give off the impression of being confident and strong, but in reality, if somebody is narcissistic, they are perhaps using that as a cover for some type of deeply rooted insecurity, an insecurity that they might not even be able to comprehend. But if you'd like to hear more about that, I have a standalone episode on my direct response to Dr. Martha Stout's The Sociopath Next Door, as well as countless other videos about psychology here on Black Box Online Radio. And you guys know the drill. You can hit the like button if you want, subscribe if you haven't, and you can download this show for free anywhere you get your podcasts under the names Black Box Podcast or Black Box True Crime. And yes, this is mostly a true crime channel, but I do have to give a shout out to Barbara Evans, because one thing that she has talked about a lot on Oak Leaves and Onions is that she deals with a lot of traits of ADHD. I think she said in one video that she has not been officially diagnosed with ADHD, but it was just eye-opening when she learned about how people with ADHD relate to taking in knowledge, about how someone can absorb an enormous amount of information. Someone can switch from subject to subject very easily. They can multitask, or if they have 5 things to do, they can do them in a very quick sequential fashion. However, if there's a different task involved, such as just going to the upstairs room to get something and bringing it back downstairs, someone could become distracted very easily. And ever since I found her channel, I just began reading more and more about ADHD and so on. And I think that it is something that I have, well, definitely never been diagnosed with myself, but I can comprehend and empathize with a lot of people who do have ADHD because I experience a lot of those things too. I mean, almost to a T, like the exact things that she was talking about. I have been dealing with for years, and I had no idea. I mean, I never thought that I had ADHD, except for maybe a couple months when I was 17 years old, and I had a few conversations about it, but that was the end of it. So if you would like to check out Airlock 6 by Barbara Evans, it's available on Amazon.com. And as I said, though, it's going to be following a female protagonist as she is trying to restart her life after she has this unfortunate encounter where she contracts the parasite, and then she decides that she's not going to be a janitorial worker, a custodian anymore, and she's going to do something that's called harvesting. And a harvester is not actually going to work on the spaceship or the space station, but rather actually go on out into the ground and do some more manual labor. But there are lots of people that she has to interact with, the protagonist Livia, and it's a set of complicated interactions because one of the most difficult things to understand is, why do people do what they do? Why do people think the way they do? Why do people behave the way they do? And a lot of that is a mystery for the protagonist of this novel. And I would love to know your response to the initial discussions that I had here. What do you think about those comments that something cannot be too dark or too morbid in a fictitious story? And I also just want to ask you guys, do you prefer stories that are going to be more soft sci-fi, soft-boiled, hard-boiled, or things that are going to be extremely dark and intense? Or do you want to have something that's more like the well-flavored soup where nothing is overpowering the other? Please put your ideas in the comment section down below. I would love to know what you think about fiction. I don't talk about fiction too much here on Black Box Online Radio, but, this is a different type of episode. And one more time, Airlock 6 by Barbara Evans is available on Amazon.com. I am your host, Black Box Ned, and that's all for me. Until next time.